subscribe to
I saw that. Because she has like,
Cocktail parties then.
wow, plenty of time.
I have to rely on that.
No, people like to chit chat at cocktail parties.
Didn't for the rest of us, but hey, you know. Do we know what time it is? Do we go by that clock?
I don't see Dan Asher back here.
Isn't it already 7:30?
Yeah.
What time is it for us?
No, I don't see him.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is, with the mustache.
In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7:30 p.m. tonight, Tuesday, November 20th, 2018. Please stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Levy?
Here.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Here.
Ms. Eglo?
Here.
And Mayor Burstein.
Here. I'd like to amend the agenda by removing Resolution 18-248, authorizing the issuance of an RFP to secure services of online news service providers to be designated for the publication of township materials, and Resolution 18-250, resolution to support the upgrading and improvement of regional infrastructure from the consent agenda to be discussed and voted on separately. May I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, well, let's review the minutes. August 14, 2018. May I have a motion to approve the August 14, 2018 Township Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second? May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? May I have a motion to approve the August 14th, 2018 Township Committee special meeting minutes?
Bleh. Yes.
So moved.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? May I have a motion to approve the September 4th, 2018 Township Committee special meeting minutes?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we're going to do committee reports next, and last week, Ms. Eglo, Ms. Lieberberg, and I were down at the League of Municipalities, and we all attended some sessions on various items of interest. One of the things that one of the sessions I went to had to do with the responses to the IRS, to the new tax law dealing with state and local income, state and local tax and the limitation on deductions, and creating a charitable trust by municipalities. And the state has come out with some regulations, and from everything I heard, at least from the legislators, investing in these charities or donating to charities for on their own, without any representation by the township as to the validity of what the IRS will do. So that's, there are caps on the donations, and it's really very convoluted and difficult to follow the logic behind it. And having sat through a class on it, I'm not sure it makes sense at all, but it's something that I think that we might want to at least talk about and make available. The other, so the recommendation from the league is to wait and see. And the other one that I went to was a discussion. I went to a couple of others, but one that I went to was a discussion on ethics, and basically the upshot was that is for 50 minutes it was a discussion on how we should not accept gifts from anybody, said in as many ways as we can. So we are a gift-free committee. And that was pretty much what I sat through.
Okay, so I went to the Sustainable Jersey, and they're celebrating their 10th year. They've given out over $5 million in grants, $3 million to towns and $2 million to schools for many things: trees, hiking paths, trash cleanup projects, education in the hazards of plastic bags, straws, balloons and their ribbons when released in an organized mass. They showed this amazing picture of when one of the new casinos opened. They let go a million balloons. And it was just a disaster because once the wind came and all the balloons went right into the ocean. So that's something that I think I'd spoken about with the environmental committee, something maybe Millburn might want to consider, just not having a allowable of a mass balloon. Jackie, Jamie Hawkins, and I attended municipal website best practices, and the three of us took away a lot of information. We were surprised that there's rules on ADA compliance for visually impaired people. The colors, the fonts are very specific. And they've suggested we're actually, Millburn's in the process of redoing our website. And they suggested when you're redoing your website, go to the library, just get some random residents and ask them to find something and see how many clicks it would take to get to what they're looking for. And that's a really good way to test the website. They talked about analytics, how important it is to keep reviewing your website, which departments get the most hits. Are people complaining that it's difficult to get something off the rec site or DPW? And there was, 400 booths at Atlantic City giving away all sorts of swag. And there was a really good booth on lighting and on window graphics. And I think Rutgers has the biggest presence down there because they're all about education and job opportunities in the municipality. So that was really interesting. A lot of job opportunities that people should know about. And it was fun. It was good. That's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Ms. Lieberberg?
So I also attended several sessions. One was entitled New Jersey Apprenticeship Network, Public Sector Workforce Strategies. And this particular session was highlighting the fact that New Jersey is really at a disadvantage. It does not have enough of a labor force to sustain all the opportunities. And Governor Murphy has created an apprenticeship program to work with municipalities looking to hire and train individuals in a variety of disciplines in conjunction with the New Jersey Department of Labor. And it appears that certainly in larger districts, more urban areas, that they are at a true deficit in finding individuals for programs. And this new initiative is designed to help recruit and evaluate talent. And it also includes working with individuals with special needs in the individual communities. So I think going forward in 2019 that would be something that we should be looking at as a township, potentially as a way to integrate some special programs or job opportunities that would utilize these young adults. So I spoke to Alex about this and kind of looking ahead to 2019 as potential opportunities for our residents, whether it be whatever the task may be when there are things in the municipality that get backed up or that a particular crunch time. So that was something that was certainly interesting and noteworthy. I attended several sessions over the course of the 2 days on marijuana legalization. So to begin, the legislature is looking that somewhere in early January 2019 that this is moving forward, and once approved, they're looking at the bill went from 60 pages to 130 pages in its last form and counting. So once this legislation is enacted, the municipality will have 180 days to decide whether to opt in or opt out. So I believe as a committee we should begin to take the pulse of ourselves, our friends, our leadership within Millburn to decide how we feel about the subject. And there are really 4 areas that we have to think about. One is cultivation, and that would either be greenhouse or hydroponic. At Millburn, I think we would be looking if we potentially at the hydroponic. We are not of a farming agrarian municipality. The second is processing and manufacturing. The third is distribution and transportation, and 4 would be retail sales. So if we decide to opt in any, we have to really be specific in terms of what potentially any of those functions would be of interest to towns. Please note that the Quinnipiac poll says that 62% in New Jersey favor legalization, but only 50% want it in their own town. So it's something that needs to be looked at a little bit more carefully. The bill also has certain restrictions, in whether from residential dwellings, distances from schools, community centers. So, for example, if Springfield decided to opt in, as the bill stands now, it would have to be 1,000 feet from Millburn. But there are things that need to be looked at, certainly addressed: noise, surveillance, controlled access, security, fencing, gates, setbacks. So there's a lot to think about. There is a task force that has been set up, and initially they were looking at a 2% tax revenue to the local municipalities, and they've all come to the conclusion that that would not anywhere be enough to cover the additional costs for police, education, and enforcement that would be required so the municipality undertakes such a venture. Some of the other states that have more rigorous, not rigorous, that's not the right word, but more higher tax revenue. California has a 20% that goes to the municipality. Colorado's at 10. Washington State is 25. Oregon is 10%. So those are the numbers that New Jersey is moving towards should this when this goes forward. The other thing that was also mentioned by one of the task force is that, unlike alcohol, there is no test to determine THC concentration. So driving impairment, there's no standardized test. So it makes it much more difficult for the police to do any kind of enforcement, because it affects people differently. And whether or not we want to consider this, in some master plan or part of our zoning, and if we say yes, where would it be in part of that plan? So I think there's a lot to think about. I would encourage my fellow committee members to think about the opt-in, opt-out. I'm going to continue to reach out to neighbors and friends. Alex, we discussed reaching out to both our fire and our police force on their thoughts on the subject, and we'll be reporting to that as well. I've also reached out to the Board of Ed to get their pulse and their take on it, and hoping in the next few weeks we can continue the discussion in a comprehensive way to make the best decisions for our residents.
Thank you. Mr. Levy, do you have anything to report?
I also have my committee
From
report.
committees?
From committees?
Yes, I do. 3 committee reports. First, the Coral Hartshorn Arboretum met on November 14. There was not a quorum present, so no agenda items were voted. However, 3 events were announced, which I agreed to announce at the Township Committee meeting. 3 fundraisers. First one is Frozen, the movie. Fun Night on December 1, 6 to 8 o'clock. Ice cream will be served. Second one is on Sunday, March 3, a pancake fundraiser from 10 to 12 with maple sugar from trees on premises. The Arboretum is looking for people to help make pancakes. Third one, March 28, Whiskey Night. Place to be determined, time to be determined. Those are the 3 events set up for the Coral Hartshorn Arboretum fundraising. Next, I attended joint meeting, and while we have commented in past meetings about what joint meeting is, and we usually don't comment on our once-a-month attendance because it's largely technical, the appearances that we make, it was announced at this past joint meeting that the Executive Director, Sam McGee, is departing. Maybe. There's still some discussion about renewing his contract. It may happen. There are a lot of political implications with the possible renewal of his contract, but right now, it will be publicly announced, or it has been publicly announced, that the position is open. So if anyone is interested in becoming the Executive Director of Joint Meeting, you have to apply within the next 30 days. Finally, I attended on November 5 the Millburn Township Board of Rec Commissioners meeting. Again, largely technical things were discussed, but I have a few announcements of import to the community. One, the Giro Park playground renovation is a little bit behind schedule. We'll finish through the winter and be done in the spring. Number two, Slayton Field tennis courts will be repaired, expected to be completed by the spring. Number three, the Giro Park basketball court will be repaired, probably in the winter, perhaps in the spring, and they're discussing what color to make the court. And number four, for those residents interested in the ski and snowboard trips, while the website shows that the trips are full, there are still, as of November 5 positions open that you have to apply for in person. So online is closed, but town hall registration is still open for those spots if anyone wants them. That concludes, Mayor, my committee reports.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any committee reports, Ms. Eglin?
No, I don't.
Ms. Rosenberg, do you have any committee reports?
DMDA will be presenting shortly, and the Senior Citizen Advisory Board will be meeting next month on December 7th, so I'll have a report after
Ms.
that.
Lieberberg?
Two committee reports. The parking ad hoc met on November 1st. We are continuing to look at ways to drive new initiatives, no pun intended, for our residents, visitors, merchants that focus on both safety and accessibility to our downtown. We have limited the Washington area to one side of the street near the high school, Bodwell Terrace and Duncan Street as well, and there we will allow the residents to have access to street parking during the school days for their use as an exception to the current time restriction. We are continuing to look at daily totals in the parking deck for both business use and commuter parking so we can maximize efficiency for our residents, employers, and commuters. I'm also happy to report we're going to be introducing a summer internship option. And that's for students working New York City or locally that need a parking place to park on a regular basis. And this will give them a designated area to be determined, and that will be from May 1st to September 1st at a reduced rate.
Thank you.
And the Public Works.
Yes.
And the Public Works Committee was a busy day, November 1st. And this is the Committee of Residents, Town Management, including DPW and Engineering, as well as two TC members, Sam Levy and I, to continue our discussion about the feasibility of the DPW potential relocation to JFK. I'm happy to report there are no deed restrictions on the existing site, and the next step would be to grant an outside firm to perform a assessment of the site, a RFP limited scope environmental study, and it's the recommendation of this ad hoc that we proceed with that study as a first step to see if it would be both feasible and permissible.
I believe that is a resolution on tonight's agenda.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I am pleased to advise that free parking begins the day after Thanksgiving, since Thanksgiving's free parking anyway, for our downtown. Time limits remain in effect, but we will not be taking money for parking downtown. So hopefully that will help to alleviate any concerns with respect to that. Okay, the next.
May I ask a question? Will there be a sign on the M-Pay so people will not be putting money in inadvertently?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yes, there will be signage, and hopefully signage that says happy things.
Happy holidays.
So, happy something.
Say free parking for sure.
Happy shopping.
And eating.
Okay, so the next, George is not here, correct? So the next item on our agenda is a special,
I just had a couple reports aside from that.
oh, I'm sorry, I
That's
didn't
right.
even ask you.
Yeah, so in the spirit of the league report, I just wanted to let the the public know that I had the opportunity to present at the league convention this year on a great grant program that's happening with our local green team. They're teaming up with the green teams of Maplewood and South Orange to create, to incentivize more sustainable takeout options. Each green team is choosing a restaurant in their locality. Millburn Township's green team has chosen La Strada. They will be providing them with a more sustainable option for takeout. And sustainable doesn't necessarily mean recyclable, but maybe something that's more biodegradable. And that will probably be happening in January at some time. So keep a lookout for that. And kudos certainly to those green teams for coming up with a great project that earned them a grant and that they're now putting forward. Secondly, while we're at the league, I'm happy to announce that we received our award for Best Visual Media in a Class C municipality, and we have Victoria Warner here, who was our intern over the summer, who helped us earn that award. And if you don't recall, that was the Powtoon cartoon that helped teach our residents and everyone how to recycle right. So, I just wanted to recognize Victoria for her efforts. I thought she did an excellent job. This is the award that we received. Come up and take a snapshot with that. Jimmy was her mentor throughout, so maybe you want to take a picture with her. And Jackie, of course, Committeewoman Lieberberg helped start that program with Victoria, and I think great effort all around and great Powtoon.
Congratulations.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
Victoria. Thank you so much. Yes, that's all I have.
Well, do you have anything?
No reports.
Yes, as a longtime participant in the league convention, I want to second what was said about the value of attending that convention. There are dozens and dozens of courses that are valuable for elected and appointed officials to attend. I did note that I didn't see any faces from Millburn in my scintillating presentation on zoning and planning, but perhaps no one wanted to fall asleep that early in the day. Nevertheless, it's a good thing, and I hope more people take advantage of it.
Okay.
My report.
Your report, special report 2018 Best Practices Inventory Resolution 18239.
Annually, the Division of Local Government Services issues its best practice checklist to municipalities in which they're required to answer a series of questions regarding the things that we do and how they stack up to what the state thinks is a best practice. We have to present that to the committee at a meeting, and I just want to report that the township received a score of 95% on those questions, and these questions range from things of, are you submitting your annual financial statement on time, your budget on time, are you rectifying the recommendations on your audit, are you making the proper notices and publishing the proper notices, things of that extent. And there were a series of 68 questions this year. And again, we scored 95%. Generally, this is tied to state aid allocation. We're well within the range to maintain our current state aid allocation. So. Just need a motion.
May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18239?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ball Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Our next item on the agenda, I'm going to invite Dan Aschenbach from the Railway River Coalition to come up and make a presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to provide some update on the Rahway River Flood Mitigation Plan. Just a little context, the Mayor's Council that was formed by the 7 mayors that span from Millburn down to Rahway, that took place a little bit after Irene and the problems that the communities had. And it's been a number of years, but there's been a lot of effort put into this to try to get a federal plan that would be funded 65% federal, 25% state, and 10% county. And we've had some events that to provide you some context of where we're at today. And in October, the beginning of the fiscal year, it was announced by Senator Menendez and Senator Booker and Congressman Lance and Congressman Payne that we would have $1 million for continuation of the study to get to a conclusion, to get a recommendation to Congress for funding. And additionally, in that appropriations bill, there was language put in there that clearly states that a project that is working its way to conclusion is a federal priority. And I provided some of the language that was put into that bill. I have to thank Congressman Lance because he did work, his staff worked on that along with Senator Menendez. They were both directly involved. And that just basically says the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers needs to continue to put this in its budget so it gets to the Congress for funding. So a few months ago, we had a final plan that was before the chief engineer. And what has to happen is the chief engineer has to recommend going forward. That plan included, as you all know, the Orange Reservoir. What would happen is a few days before a major storm would come through, the water would be released from the reservoir, which would provide a substantial capacity then for the watershed to drain there, and that would lower elevations of the river downstream. It's not only obviously beneficial to Millburn, but downstream there are communities that have flood plan projects that they can't do without upstream storage. So this whole Mayor's Council was formed again a number of years ago with the concept of regionalization of a project. The chief engineer supported the entire plan except raised questions about one aspect of it, and that is something called forecast-informed water release, using forecasts to determine when you release water from the reservoir. The California Department of Water Resources, 6 different dams in New Jersey, 3 different federal agencies use this concept to help with mitigation of flooding downstream. The Army Corps has a very conservative view of a lot of its policies today because of some criticisms that came its way a few years back, and they're more cautious. So in the review, they determined they didn't want to go that direction, which has been part of this plan for 4 years. So the Mayor's Council has appealed this, and they are working on reconsidering what we put forward. This is because it's a federal project, and the federal rules apply. If it was a state project, the state of New Jersey agreed with this approach. Actually, the New York district of the Army Corps of Engineers also approved, but the chief engineer is the chief. So we're in that position. What Senator Menendez in particular, who's been very important in this effort, he got approval from the Army Corps that if this appeal was not successful, that they would concentrate on alternative storage solutions in South Mountain Reservation, and that could start immediately. Much of the studies have already been done. I point out, for example, the Indiana bat, which is an environmental concern of the federal EPA. It has its home somewhere in a 10-mile radius. They had to make sure that whatever project was done wouldn't affect that, and it took 4 months, 5 months to get that clearance. So all those sorts of studies need to be done. Now, there's not a project that's been developed yet for an alternative to the Orange Reservoir water release. We have to wait for the appeal disposition. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, the Essex County engineer, the Essex County chief executive, the various representatives of the different communities met to start the process of thinking about what other solution could be developed. We have Mott Engineering as the engineering firm, with the idea of helping to direct the Army Corps to a storage solution that would work, that would get the cost-benefit analysis that would make it a federal project for for funding. And that work is just starting preliminarily, and we've gone through 10 different alternatives in this process. This would be number 11. And there's a view from the engineers that there is a potential there that could replace the water release concept from the Orange Reservoir. But, we don't have a timetable. Well, we did have a timetable. It was supposed to be starting at least the discussions in the first week in December, but until we get the appeal from disposition from the Army Corps, we don't have that. So we have the funding for finalizing the study. We have 7 very dedicated communities. The mayor of Millburn has been wonderful in this effort, advocating for Millburn. And the other communities as well. In Cranford, we had, during Irene, approximately 425 homes that had water on its first floor and in kitchens and bedrooms. Union and part of Union had a pretty big a loss. I think it was $32 million of loss. Springfield as well. So there are 7 mayors that have been engaged in this process to get to a solution. It's a complicated issue that has taken some time to get through this federal process, which is daunting at times. But considering the environmental issues and the cost of doing such a project, it has to go through this process. We could, I've often said we could do it ourselves, but it would be a big issue for local taxpayers. And I say that with a sense of urgency because there is another storm around the corner, and that will come, and people will, I don't know who, but people have impacts, as you can see what's happened during this past summer in different areas of the country. So the Mayor's Council has been a nonpartisan group. It's been the mayors of each of the communities for the last few years. And they've focused on this to get a project authorized. We've had wonderful cooperation from our federal representatives, and in particular, again, Senator Menendez, Booker, and Congressman Lance. So going forward, now we have a new introduction to a new congressman, which will be important, and that meeting is supposed to be scheduled in the next few weeks. And we have, again, you'll hear more about once we hear about this appeal and what the next step will be. And before anything could go on in South Mountain Reservation, as we've had previous experience, Millburn will be an important participant in that. Not only participant, but a beneficiary of it, because this community is the first up when, with a big storm. So my closing here is only that the way this works is that why we got federal priority as a project is that communities do have to advocate, and advocate again and again. And we have that need right now to urge the Army Corps, the senators, the congressmen, that this is not, this effort is going to remain until it's done. And that would mean that the Millburn Township Committee, Millburn Mayor, send as many letters or a resolution or whatever the best communication. So when we come back, the Army Corps has they complain, like everybody complains, they don't have a big enough budget. But until you make the knock on the door and really push hard, and we've been able to be successful in that area, but the actual construction would be obviously a lot more expensive. So having the Township of Millburn be a very important part of advocating would be very much appreciated. So I don't know if you have any questions. Yep. Okay.
Wait, Ziegler?
Yeah, hi, how are
Hi.
you?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you. So I'm just wondering, you didn't mention anything about the study about the integrity of the dam. Doesn't this all rest on the integrity of that dam? Is this what the funding you're talking about, or is this for further funding after the dam is deemed okay, that it can sustain whatever we're planning on doing downstream?
Well, it's really the capacity of storage that's important. So the state believes you can do a project with the Orange Dam without that big of an expense.
Okay.
But the Army Corps, because they are at a higher standard, and this becomes a federal project, it has to be done according to how they view it. And they don't want any question that the integrity was affected by any project. So that budget was in alternative 4A, it was called, met the cost benefit ratio that they require for a federal project. What the question about it was this forecast informed water release. That the concern was that they would release water, and it wouldn't be Millburn's issue because the water would be gone already. It would be downstream, and there would be a flash storm that would come. So we've had people look into this, and the probability of that type of circumstance would be so small, because you're not talking about every day this happening. Irene was 2011, and the protocol was just being developed of how that would work, and the capacity, the storage capacity, was sufficient to provide enough benefits, here, and then regulatory benefits downstream. So that's the conservatism that the Army Corps has put. It wasn't fully about the integrity of the dam. Now, not doing the project, it's an older dam. There are many old dams that don't get. This was an actually avenue for maybe improving it. They won't state that it's not. It doesn't have integrity. They still believe it is. They have a maintenance program and all those sorts of things. But once you do any work on such a structure, their concern was it would create some integrity issues. That's why they would propose either changing where the pipes would go through or doing modification of the dam. But the issues that were raised had nothing to do with actually that part of the project. It was just this concept, protocol of water, forecast-based water release, forecast-informed water release. So.
Mr. Levy?
Yes. Who, I think the question really is what makes the decision on the water release? So a storm is coming 4 days from now, and there's a decision to be made on water release. What is the body that makes that decision? What is it called?
That would be part of the project of decision-making. We didn't get to that point yet.
No, that's not a body.
Yeah.
That's decision-making. What body? Ultimately, it comes down to a person or persons who
Right.
make that decision.
Right now,
Who is it, and who do they work for?
right now it's the City of Orange Water Department with the advice of the county, Essex County. And I know this for a fact because during Irene as well as during Sandy, mayors from downstream came up to make sure that, as Millburn did, to make sure that there is a pipe there now, and it's closed, obviously. So prior to storms now, Millburn contacts the county, contacts the water to make sure they open it. But it's not a lot of water that comes through it. This would have been bigger increase. So they were developing a protocol that could be a
Who's they? They're developing the protocol.
Army
What's
Corps.
the pronoun they? They is a who,
Yeah.
right?
The Mayor's Council was developing a protocol that would have to be approved by the state DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. And that protocol would be, I believe, potentially creating a new organization that would have some role in making sure that that 4-day release was done properly.
All right, but that's what may happen in the future.
Yeah.
Today, there's a storm 4 days from now. From what I understand your explanation to be, it's the county executive who ultimately makes that decision, because it's the City of Orange with the advice and consent of the county executive. So it's basically Mr. DiVincenzo who makes that decision, right? Is he the one who is sitting there making that decision on the release on behalf of these downstream municipalities? That's what I want to know.
All I can do is my experience, and I know that the water department and the mayor of Orange came out and immediately did what they had to do, because they're
That doesn't answer the question.
I know,
You
but
know
they're
that.
yeah, it's not housed in any type of it's the water, it's the Orange, they own the dam, so it's their responsibility, and they have done it in the past because they understand downstream the impacts, and it doesn't affect them at all.
Correct.
So what our argument was that there needs to be some way of there being community participation in this, like Millburn in particular.
But today, there's no community participation. I understand
No.
that in a perfect regulatory world, that's what everyone prefers. So my second question is that, I mean, there's people here in the audience who may or may not have been affected by this, or people who are watching who may or may not be affected, and they hear all these, talk to Booker and Menendez and send letters, and the township committee as a municipality should continue to pressure its elected representatives to cause these things to happen. That's all nice and a good civics lesson. When will all this ultimately happen? When will these decisions make? When will this decision process take place? So those who are part of the 425 who had their first floor flooded are going to want to say, is this a year from now, 2 years from now? Do I have to sweat out another 2 years of storms, that kind of thing?
I can't give you an exact answer because this is a process of getting an appropriation to actually construct the project. If you wanted to, you could appropriate that amount of money, and I've proposed this too, each of the towns take a share of it and do it through the property tax. But what you're in competition for against Pellet, Iowa, and California is getting priority. And we've done an incredible job of getting that priority to get a project that met the cost-benefit ratio that's a requirement under federal law. And I could name all the mayors in Millburn that has been very active in making sure that gets done. And we've been getting the appropriations for study. So we're positioned now to get, at least if the Orange Reservoir Dam project is still part of the approved project, we'll get our first appropriation probably in a year if they work as hard as they have been, Senator Menendez. But if we do have to go back and restudy this alternative storage, it'll depend on how problematic it will be, in the sense of environmental issues. I don't believe there are any, but it's again, it has to meet those federal standards. It's hard to meet federal standards. It just is. So this effort of advocacy, if you go to the Army Corps site on New York District Office, this project has the most traffic because people are concerned about it, and the more heightened interest, congressmen will listen. The county executive has been very supportive of our effort. I know he's very strong, powerful executive, and maybe we wouldn't get as far as we have without his support. So everybody's been on board. All the different Congressman Lance, he was wonderful in this. And what's troublesome now, in one respect, having to educate a new congressman, but he's already said to the local officials he's going to be there for us. So I can't give you an exact answer. The only alternative is to do things ourselves, which, that becomes a big expensive project.
What's the number? What's the big expensive number?
Well, for the 4A, it would be $70 million project, and that's 65% federal, 25% state. That's the rules, and then the 10% is up for debate. I say county because West Orange is in Essex County, and where the water is coming from is largely Essex County, so it makes sense it's a county project. But it also makes sense for Union County to participate because the water's coming down that way, so they might as well be involved. So that part, the allocation on the local share hasn't been figured out. That's versus doing it ourselves. I would argue, because I was mayor in Cranford during Irene, and I went around for a month or more with residents, and I know what happened, what people's lives changed. So I would argue for that, but that's kind of an unreasonable request when you're considering all the other things you have to do as a community. So that's why we spent a lot of time. Mayor Hamoff was originally involved in trying to come up with a way to get advocacy working to get this thing done. I can't give you an exact timetable. Only that by having that advocacy, putting on front of, if you just let things go for a while, everybody forgets, and that's what's actually happened with Irene. A lot of people just live their lives and they don't think back about it until it happens again. So we're hopefully going to get a decision very shortly, and then hit the ground running to get to what happens next is the chief engineer knows us. He knows he's head of all projects nationally. He knows this Rahway River project, and he's promised the senator. Maybe he was hoping the senator wasn't going to be reelected, but he's back because Senator Menendez actually he didn't allow appointments for the Army Corps for a period of time until he got an answer to how they would confirm doing an alternative on the storage issue. That's showing his hardball how he's been supportive of us. So we got to keep on doing that sort of thing. And believe me, I've seen it citizens stepping up and pushing, it does have results at some point. And we've gone so far in this process to not keep on going, it just wouldn't make any sense. I mean, they studied 10 different alternatives, all sorts of things. You remember the Little Hoover? I think that's what it was called. The South Mountain Detention Basin that everybody went crazy about. That's no longer part of this. It's pushed off the side because there was too much opposition to it. But that was the best project from a flood control perspective because it provided the best, but you never get it through anywhere. So that's why we moved off to the Orange Dam, which downstream got as much benefit, but Orange gets a little bit less from that. But it's still substantial immediate benefit. It's just got to get done. So, so I appreciate your question. I really do. It's a frustrating one.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the DMDA budget hearing. Do I read this first? Whereas pursuant to NJSA 40:56-84, the Downtown Millburn Development Alliance 2019 budget, as advertised, may be read by its title at the public hearing. If a complete copy of the approved budget as advertised shall be posted in a public place where public notices are customarily posted in the town hall of the township, and is made available to each person requesting the same during the week and during the public hearing. And whereas the Township Committee of the Township of Millburn hereby determines that the above conditions have been met, now therefore be it resolved that the 2019 Downtown Millburn Development Alliance budget shall not be read in full but only by its title. I now declare the public hearing open. So, would you like to take a presentation, Mr. Sullivan? Okay. It's not working by
So
itself.
I think you're just gonna have it.
Unless it's just this.
I assume that's what he's putting on.
Here's the original ordinance.
Yeah, I have it.
We have this.
Yeah.
We are so happy to be back in Millburn. Everyone come on down and shop.
Best breakfast in town, serving the community since 1992.
Celebrating our 10th anniversary and downtown's over. A magnetic experience. Come play with us.
Come down to Millburn where it's always salad season. Come on.
That small town around. We have everything here that you need, and if you don't,
On behalf of the DMDA and our Board of Community Volunteers, thank you for taking the time to allow us to present our budget this evening. After the last council meeting, where we postponed our budget discussion until tonight, I was asked by a committee member, if you knew the budget was going to pass, then why did you table the discussion? It's a fair question, and we did take the time to address it in the last meeting, and I'm happy to address it again tonight. Traditionally, the DMDA budget has been presented at the end of the year during the November-December timeframe, which is where we are now. To break with this tradition, as a re-energized board with a commitment to transparency and proactivity, our consultant and I met with the committee over the summer to review our 2019 financial plan, and we took the unprecedented step of submitting our budget and locking in our numbers, the same numbers that you see before you tonight, at the end of August. However, as we approached our October timeframe, the DMDA had just received its second half funding, and we wanted to get a better handle on our 2018 spending, which we have been able to do. We wanted to refine our executive director search to ensure the budget accommodated our top candidates, which we now know it does. And we wanted to engage more of our stakeholders in our long-term vision and our commitment to the town, which we have done. Thank you again for allowing us to move our discussion to this evening. When I last addressed the council upon becoming president over the summer, the DMDA was in need of repair. I stood up here and made promises to the committee and to the town. As a board, we identified opportunities in the areas of compliance, financial responsibility, transparency, communication, strategy, and execution, and set clear, attainable goals for the back half of 2018 to address and overcome these opportunity areas and to begin earning back the trust that had slipped away from our organization. There's another opportunity area for the DMDA that wasn't brought up at that time, but I'm bringing it up here tonight because it needs to be said and it needs to be heard. When I became president, I was told and even warned by many of our stakeholders that the DMDA had lost its credibility, not only because of its complacency, but also because it had developed a reputation as a politically driven and one-sided organization. That's silly, I thought. I can fix this. I've got no agenda or ulterior motive. I bet I can help the DMDA move forward in this area also. To say this specific opportunity area has been put to the test is an understatement. From the moment I began volunteering as president, I began to truly witness the wayward direction that the DMDA in this town, my town, has taken. The texts, phone calls, emails, and office visits started coming in immediately from both sides of the electorate. None of these interactions had anything to do with the DMDA or its stated mission. Nearly all of them were focused on the bipartisanship that has divided our town, the election, and the misguided perception that the DMDA exists as part of a political platform or advocacy group. Most of the interactions involved a person or group of people from either side of the electorate declaring that someone on the other side had made them angry for an arbitrary reason from the past or present, and often demanding, yes, demanding, that as DMDA president, it was my responsibility to police, correct, or eliminate the adversity. From the time I woke up to a thundering phone call at 7 a.m. on a Saturday and was forced to spend the entire morning changing 2 words in a third-party political statement, to the fallout from a posting in the private Millburn Work Mom message group that's already taken about 5 years off of my life, what should have been a volunteer role focused on improving and bringing shoppers to our downtown had soon become a full-time career in multi-directional anger management and political mediation. I checked in with my peers from other districts and asked them if it was typical to spend this much, if any, time dealing with such matters while overseeing a business improvement district such as the DMDA, and they shook their heads in disbelief. As these interactions continued, I issued 2 public statements reminding everyone not only of the true mission of the DMDA, but also that while the DMDA as an organization does not and cannot support or oppose any candidate for public office as required by its nonprofit designation, our board members and volunteers, when acting in their individual capacity, do not give up their basic First Amendment rights of speech and political association, whether we agree with them or not, and that it is 100% against the law to ask me or anyone to restrict their individual activity. I directed the community to the National Alliance for Justice for further explanation of why what they were repeatedly asking me and my volunteers to do was not only wrong, it was illegal. I explained that it would be unconstitutional for me to tear my volunteers' campaign signs down, no matter how many times one uses the word urgent when texting me on a Saturday night when I'm on vacation, and that it would be against the law to throw a volunteer off of the board because they were photographed standing next to a political candidate in an Instagram post, no matter how many times one calls me on my cell phone to complain about it while I'm coaching a softball tournament. But the political pressure and the widespread misrepresentation of the DMDA's true mission didn't subside, it only intensified, culminating in a stomach-turning low point when I was shaken down by a community leader at 7:30 on a Sunday morning at the Millburn Diner on the eve of the election. But something else happened over the last 2 months. While the electorate was perseverating over lawn signs and Instagram posts, the DMDA received its funding, and our volunteers began to fulfill the promises that were made to our downtown merchants and stakeholders and to this committee over the summer. Since we received our funding in September, we planted roses in Taylor Park, and we organized fall arrangements in the downtown planters. We established a downtown parking subcommittee and identified 20 additional shopper parking spaces, including 9 in Lot 1 and 11 on Spring Street, to be ready in time for the holidays, with more additional parking in the works. One of our volunteers, Tom Lee, and I'm pointing him out because everybody in this room should know who he is, brought together a group of architects, property owners, design experts, and township representatives to create a pair of retail signage ordinances that will help unify the look and feel of our downtown while making it easier for shoppers to connect with retailers and potential business owners to identify vacant properties. We held ribbon-cutting ceremonies for 5 of our downtown merchants, including 3 new businesses, an existing business expansion, and a 10th anniversary celebration, important milestones that had gone unnoticed and unappreciated in the past, and provided these merchants with event resources, social media exposure, and a public ceremony with ribbon cutting and a certificate of appreciation, thanking them for perpetuating our community's economic development, pride, and spirit. We held a series of downtown events, bringing our Millburn Live program to the fall season for the first time and expanding our Halloween preschool celebration. We created the Downtown Millburn Snowflake Stroll, a local celebration inside Taylor Park leading up to the holiday park lighting, bringing together the best of our community, including groups from the Paper Mill Playhouse, the high school, our town's multicultural civic and youth organizations, our first aid, fire, and police departments, and an assortment of holiday characters, with hundreds of families planning to attend this Saturday. More importantly, instead of shutting down the street and closing off parking spaces on one of the busiest shopping weekends of the year, as we've done in the past with the traditional Snowflake Parade, we have invited the community into our beautiful park while keeping our streets and stores open, and we have arranged for crossing guards to escort families in and out of the park where they can shop, dine, and enjoy our downtown, and we have engaged our merchants to plan promotions before, during, and after the event. We established a long overdue relationship with the Millburn Short Hills Chamber of Commerce and are helping to enhance the experience and the park beautification that they created last year with the winter walk and park lighting, turning downtown Millburn into an 8-week destination during the upcoming holiday season. And as a side note, I didn't know they were going to be here, we sincerely thank Roxanne, Stephanie, and all of the other community volunteers for inviting us to share and support their amazing vision for creating something special in the heart of our downtown, and we look forward to working on future initiatives together. We updated our Downtown Millburn website using the talents of local residents for the design and photography. The site now features a refreshed interface, an updated directory, updated parking information, gorgeous photos of our town, prominent news and promotional information, and new features such as a place for property owners to upload and feature their vacancy listings, and a clear path for potential tenants to more easily navigate the process of starting a new business in downtown Millburn, which will be one of our primary focuses in 2019. Check it out tonight after the meeting at downtownmillburn.org. We began sending regularly scheduled emails to merchants and stakeholders to both inform them about pertinent downtown information and to solicit offers and promotions that we can share with the community. We have also been sending emails to the thousands of recipients in our shopper database at least twice per month, outlining offers, events, and information that will bring them to Millburn to eat and shop, including a Small Business Saturday email scheduled to go out tomorrow. We engaged with our downtown merchants in creating a series of videos, one of which you saw a few moments ago, which profile the town as a warm and inviting place to shop, dine, play, explore, and start a business. The particular 60-second clip you just saw, which can also be seen on the website, features the personalities of 32 of our downtown merchants and is currently playing during the coming attractions before every movie at every showtime at the Bowtie Cinema in the center of town, where people from inside and outside our community are physically at the point of engagement. And finally, we held a compliant community-wide election that will welcome 5 volunteers to new terms on the board. Tom Lee, who I referenced earlier tonight, is someone everyone here should know, a resident and community leader who has proven himself as an even-keeled and indispensable driving force behind our organization. Tammy Blau, a resident and commercial property expert who has made it her personal mission to fill every vacant retail space in town. Alana Allen, owner of Pop Gifts and Stroller Express, and Nadej Nicole, owner of the Book House, 2 entrepreneurial residents with the creativity and foresight to bring innovative and experience-based businesses to our community, and are excited to bring their creative spark to the DMDA. And Andrew Morgan, property owner and business owner of the Millburn Deli, arguably the most iconic business in town, who looked up at me when he was signing the nomination form to join the board of the DMDA and said, "David, I'm tired of all the politics and divisiveness around here. I just want to do good for the town." He, like so many others, including myself, is tired of the politics and divisiveness, and he just wants to do good for the town. The merchants have spoken, and I've engaged with nearly every one of them over the past few months, far beyond the 32 you saw in the video, physically spending time inside their stores, shaking their hands and learning about their businesses. And more importantly, I've listened to them. I've listened to their thoughts on the past, present, and future of our downtown, and they are hopeful and they are optimistic, but they are also concerned. And these concerns go beyond complete streets. It's more than that. It's the changing dynamic of our town and its shopping habits and what it means to have a bricks and mortar storefront in 2018. It's the multiple years and counting of the anxiety and uncertainty of not knowing if or when the street and sidewalk in front of their store is going to be constructed or deconstructed. It's the insanity of going on social media and seeing our own residents go out of their way to convince people not to come here. And it's the constant shockwave of negativity resonating from this building, created by a leadership that has been divided by anger and discontent, the same anger and discontent that I described earlier. As one retailer affectingly put it, they feel like the neglected children in a contentious divorce. Children in a divorce, that's what we've allowed our downtown to become. And if the DMDA is that conduit that reconnects the merchants and the property owners with their leadership and its constituents, spends time truly listening to its stakeholders, and recognizes and appreciates our town the way it deserves, then as a downtown business owner and as a resident with this board behind me, I'm proud to lead it. So back to the original question that was asked by the committee member after the last meeting. If you knew the budget was going to pass, then why did you table the discussion? Well, to be honest, that's not entirely true. We didn't know the budget was going to pass. We hoped the budget was going to pass the same way we hope it passes tonight, but my volunteers and I take nothing for granted. In fact, it's this presumed sense of entitlement and complacency that got the DMDA into trouble in the first place. And we know we've still got our opportunity areas, some more glaring than others, but we also know that we're moving in the right direction and we are putting the right team together, and we believe in our future and the difference we can make for our downtown. So please continue to push us and continue to challenge us, but please do it for the right reasons. The 2019 budget you see before you is the same budget that we discussed with you in August. It's the same budget that was made available to the public and shared with our stakeholders in September, and it's the same budget that was shared with the committee in October when we respectfully requested to delay the public hearing. The 2019 numbers are solid. They are strong enough to support our mission and flexible enough to provide extra attention where and when we need it. On behalf of the DMDA and our Board of Volunteers, we hope that you will pass our 2019 budget this evening and allow us to build upon the momentum we have created as we continue to keep our promise and fulfill our true mission and obligation to the downtown community. Thank you once again for your time and your partnership.
And we thank you for your hard work. Mr. Levy?
Yes, I applaud your efforts. I applaud your words. I applaud your speech. I applaud your passion. The most powerful words for me, however, sitting here on this dais, is that you said that you were shaken down by a community leader. Those are your words. Was that community leader an elected official that you were shaken down by?
I said what I needed to say.
Okay. Could you amplify what you mean by shaken down?
I think I said what I needed to say.
All right. Well, I'll ask you then privately. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from any of the members of the Township Committee?
I have a
Ms.
question.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes. I have just two questions. The professional services consultants that you enumerated, a budget of 22K.
Mm-hmm.
What would their capacities be professionally? What would their you've carved out attorneys and accountants.
Sure.
So what would the professional background of those individuals include?
Absolutely. We spoke about, and one of the things that we looked at when we did this budget is looking at what's been done in the past and looking at what the opportunity areas might be for the future.
Speak into the microphone.
Sorry, and I've lost my voice. I didn't. We looked at the opportunity areas for the future. One of the things that we haven't done is bring in a planning consultant or a parking consultant or someone who has expertise in a lot of the areas that we really need to be providing leadership within the downtown for. So we put that in arbitrarily, but planning and parking and those types of areas are what we had in mind for that.
And then my other question is, you have a budget of $50,000 for promotion and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
What would you envision as that line item?
50. So, I think strategically, there's 3.5 areas that we're going to be looking into to market, right? We've got bringing shoppers to town. We've got bringing new business into retail vacancies. We've got events, and then I would say the half is if and when something happens to the streets, we need to be able to communicate that better, communicate that effectively. So we've got those target areas. I think as far as the $50,000 to $60,000, to be fair, when an executive director comes in and a full board, we can talk about the tactics behind it. But I guess back of the napkin, you've got about $20,000, which would go into ad spend. Right now, I mentioned the bow tie cinema. That's roughly $1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So if we were to do that, if we were to do some transit advertising, I'm big into local advertising, not so much print. But if we were to do transit, that runs about $850 a month. Plus, you've got boosted Facebook posts and other online advertising. That's about a third of it right there. I think another third of it, we'd want to go and try some things that we haven't tried before. A sweepstakes, a pop-up shop. Some of those, like in Springfield, they have the wraps around the stores to bring in retailers. We'd want to have flexibility to do that. And finally, one thing that should be mentioned is that there's no marketing support right now. Last year they had Nettie in the office executing some of this stuff. This year we don't have that in the executive director budget. So ideally we'd have an agency or some marketing support helping us to execute against whatever it is that we decide to use for marketing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes.
Any other questions of committee members. Ms.
yes.
Hagel, yes,
Okay,
Rebecca?
thank you. That was a great presentation, thank you, and I love the video. How is the executive director search going?
So we've identified some candidates, which we feel really, really good about. And both of them, are, the candidates that we're considering, are able to start January 1st. And they both have great ideas for the town. It's a
So this
canvas
was for the-
situation.
You have an executive search committee within your board?
We have an executive search committee. We had an executive search committee. We did an extensive, and Jackie's been helping us with her recruiting background, so we did an extensive search. We brought in tons and tons of resumes. Some were good, some were great, some were not worth looking at, but we did an extensive search. We've identified a few candidates, and obviously there's going to be an interviewing committee moving forward, but just in the interactions that I've had with them, they're both qualified and ready to start if we should move forward, and the interviews will be next, and we're working with Jackie to coordinate that.
And that'll be a full-time position?
Part-time position.
Part-time.
Part-time position.
So the legal fees were spent last year, that would not be repeated this year.
Oh, God, I hope
It was
not.
a big hit last year, yeah. I know you have all new bylaws, they've been accomplished, everyone's following all the new bylaws. I know that was a big thing you spoke about.
We are following the bylaws.
Great. I'm just curious, the farmer's market, in other towns, I know like every town has a farmer's market, are they always run by the SID bid, or sometimes they run by the town on their own?
Either one,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. We need to look into the farmer's market a little bit more.
Roseland runs their own,
Mhm.
I know the town runs that one. Other towns will run, I think, the towns that have them, the bids. Yeah, Montclair, you're right, has 5 farmers.
Has 5, wow. Well, it's a big town, it's a city. Okay, well, I think you seem to be on target, and, yeah.
Okay, so if there are no other questions by committee members, I'll open up to the public. If anybody has any questions or comments, please let me know. Yes? Mr. Heller?
Maybe David could
No,
stay up.
you need to direct your comments and questions to the committee, and we'll go from there.
Could you, Madam Mayor, tell me what the additional $73,000 left over from 2018 is being used for?
Okay, so that's the question you have. For anything else?
I have other questions.
Okay, Mr. Sorkin?
Sure. So, and that's a good question. I think it's one that
My question is, if I'm asking the mayor and the committee,
No,
why
you're
is the mayor
directing-
and the
you're
committee
excuse me.
not aware of money that, as per the bylaws, as per the SID ordinance, there's 5 people sitting up there that are elected. There's a town administrator, there's an attorney. There's no one on this township committee that is aware of our own SID ordinance. How are you not asking the questions of the DMDA of how $73,000 is being spent? What are you doing?
You're presuming we've not asked that question. Maybe
I'm
that's
assuming
yes
and
or no.
presuming.
Okay. Mr. Sorkin, the leftover money from 2018's budget,
So I did mention before that one of the reasons we tabled my talking.
you're addressing the board.
So I did mention before that we wanted to, one of the reasons we tabled the discussion was to get a better handle on our 2018 spending. We do see that after this year, there will be about $50,000 left over, largely due to that, and that was allocated for staffing. And that was allocated for staffing and payroll taxes and the staff that we haven't had for half of the year. So we do realize that we're gonna have extra money at the end of the year. And that's something, obviously, we could speak internally as a board with the administrator. It's kind of unprecedented. We have extra funds, and we can decide as a board what, we come up with a recommendation to what to do with those funds. It doesn't affect our budget for next year. It does affect, for the first time, there's money. We need to discuss how to move forward with that, but again, it doesn't impact the budget for next year.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Being that you seem to have the answers, you find that to be acceptable? Have you looked at the budget?
I'm not having a conversation with you. Yes, I've looked at the budget.
Well, the
and-
answer that you just got is not according to the budget that you're looking at for end of year 2018. It shows $73,000.
You have another question?
I have another question. I'm asking you, you seem to have the answers, or if you'd like to ask Mr. Sorkin why the budget for 2018 does not show 73,000, it does show $73,000. He just told you there's going to be $50,000. Where's the additional $23,000 going?
We're in November. Checks are being written in November, December. So it's a year-to-date budget, and we're in the middle of that.
All right. Can you show me where in the SID ordinance or in the DMDA bylaws that it allows carryover of funds to then not be allocated in the 2019 budget? They're not in there.
Okay. Next question.
I'd like an answer. Ask, if I'm not allowed to have contact, I think you need to ask the board president, where are those funds for 2019? They're not in the budget. You can't approve this budget without it being accounted for the funds. It says very specifically in the ordinance and in the DMDA bylaws that funds need to be as best as possible allocated, budgeted, pro forma'd.
As best as possible, correct?
Correct.
So my understanding is, was that as best as possible? Have they been allocated as best as possible?
Has the extra $50,000,
Have you allocated your budget as best as possible?
the budget has been allocated. Here's the budget, and then where the funds.
Are the $50,000 in the 2019 budget?
I guess where I was asked this question, the budget is stated as for the assessment, where the funds come from, or the extra $50,000 we didn't take that into consideration in August when we put this together. I mean, the year, there's my budget for the staff.
The representation was that they're being transparent, and I support the DMDA going forward, but you can't ask the property owners and the merchants to allocate an additional $50,000 of their money that is not put into a budget. It's in essence a slush fund that needs to be allocated, and if it's for an employee to hire a DMDA director full-time, that's fine, all for it. But you can't have an offline $50,000 amount that you're not allocating anywhere. So that I'm standing up here asking this question, that you haven't seen this, and no one's asking this question for the several months that this has been out there, is just, aside from the fact that, unless you can tell me there's been an audit, under your ordinance, our ordinance, not their bylaws, you can't vote on this tonight. I'm not saying vote it down. Tell me that we, you, us, as a township, have an audit. It's specifically in the ordinance that it has to be by April 30th, 2018, by a certified public accountant. So I'm asking Counselor, can we proceed and vote on this tonight? I'm suggesting it maybe needs to be put off for 2 weeks to have the audit completed, which again, I'm not even sure that the 16 and 17 audit have been completed. I've asked for it, it's never been presented to me. They keep telling you, and Ms. Stone said at a prior meeting, yes, it's been done, but nobody's been given it. Do you have the audit?
It's available in the clerk's office.
First time.
Where it's supposed to.
In the 2018 as well?
No, it's 16, 17.
Why are we here tonight? Why are we here tonight? If the audit has not been completed as per the SID ordinance, why are we here tonight? The 18 is, I'm sorry, the 7, if I'm, right, we have the 17?
Seven,
Right,
16,
we've asked in the past, it hasn't been presented. I apologize, yes, correct, the 17, if it's presented. I think it should be made available, and it is in the clerk's office?
correct.
Okay. All right, I'd like to come back to the 50,000. My suggestion to the Township Committee is to reduce the budget by $50,000. My suggestion would be to approve the budget subject to a reduction of $50,000 to allow for the property owners who pass along their tax to the merchants. As they have not allocated those dollars into the 2019 budget, it would not be appropriate accounting to allow $50,000 to just float. It's not accounted for. If they want to come back with another budget to put the $50,000 in there for something that they're really going to use it for, but it's not here in front of you tonight. It wasn't in the first reading, it's not in the second reading.
Oh, hang on, you wanna ask of him, or, no? Okay, so just hold on a second, let Mr. Heller finish his comments and questions.
I would additionally ask, I believe in the ordinance, the budget needed to be posted in a public place, separate from in the newspaper, which it was published. I believe it needed to be put into town hall in a public place and for the public to be made aware of that. I don't believe that was done.
Well, again, I'd have to confirm with the clerk who's not here, but,
It's in the ordinance.
no, I understand. Yeah, but also,
It was on the bulletin board.
and it's available in the clerk's office, and anybody who received the notice about the budget has the ability to come to the clerk and review the budget.
That's not what the ordinance says. You don't have to come to the clerk. It needs to be posted in a public place. If it has
Well,
been,
But yes.
I haven't
we were
seen it.
to- we
I've
were
looked
told
for
was
it.
Posted on the bulletin
Back
board.
in, I don't know, was it October, when it was originally put out?
but has it been 10 days prior to tonight's meeting? Has it been there for the last 10 days?
As far as I know, I don't check on it on a daily basis.
I haven't been able to find it.
Our assistant clerk just told you that she posted it herself.
Well, why don't we go look? If it hasn't been there for the last 10 days, it's specifically in the ordinance.
Thank you. Anything, I mean, we have no reason to believe it wasn't there. Anything else?
I think Mr. Sorkin should recognize that there are a lot of people who have participated in both the parking analysis, the bylaw review, the sign ordinance, the removal of signs. It's not just the people that he chooses to recognize. The speech that he made was, in my opinion, I didn't expect to speak tonight, was not inclusive. It was divisive for those who have participated. My only question tonight to you was about the $50,000.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
And no other township committee person has any question to that.
Are there any
Okay.
other questions or
Thank you.
comments? So before I close, well, I can close the public hearing, right? I can close the public? Okay.
Yeah,
Wait.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Oh,
Hang on
not
one
yet,
second.
sorry.
I declare the public hearing closed and ask for a motion to approve Resolution 18240, which is that that it was read by title. It's not the approval of the budget, it's the,
I'm sorry, I was looking at these, sure, Sam, I'm sorry, Mayor, what? I'm sorry.
I need a motion to approve the resolution to read by title, the 2019 Downtown Millburn Development Alliance budget. It's not approving the budget, it's approving reading it by title.
Okay, so would you like me to move that?
Yes, please.
I will move that.
And I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Bliglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Burston?
Yes. Now, the next resolution is to approve the budget. Do you discuss it before we move it? Do you want to discuss it before we move it?
I would like to make a comment, a suggestion, if I may. When we approve this budget, they get their money in 2 installments, correct?
Correct.
Would it be possible to have a caveat on there saying, in absence of seeing a substantial improvements and seeing how the DMDA is parsing out, that we can reevaluate before the second installment goes out?
I don't think we can do that.
What
Mayor?
does substantial improvement mean?
Well, that we speak to the stakeholders, the property owners, the people who are paying into the taxes, the property owners, and the merchants, see how they feel they're getting a bang for their buck, see if they feel they've gotten a substantial improvement over the previous DMAs.
Okay, the reason, I think you need to give them a year. I think that this DMDA board has really just started, and the board just had their election in November. And I think that in the few, it hasn't even been a few months, but a few, the short period of time that Mr. Sorkin's been president, the DMDA has done an amazing amount of work. And they have a lot of work ahead of them, but I think that not giving them a year to really improve is sort of unfair.
Well, will we be reviewing before that second installment is released?
We generally don't, we generally don't oversee them to that degree. And I don't know that I could sit here and say, if this one's unhappy and this one's happy, it's very hard to say, you gotta list. I think you have to give them a year to really get their house in order, and by then we'll know.
So I'm just asking if there's a review process in 6 months before that second installment goes out. If that's not usual and customary, then
Well,
it's not.
usual and customary. I'm not saying we can't do it. I think anything, you can make any changes you want when you're sitting up here, I presume, and look at it and see, but I don't know what you're gonna really be doing.
Mayor?
Hang on a second. Mr. Levy?
Where I thought committee person Eglo was going was, on the second installment, the ordinance 12-92, and I wasn't prepared to discuss this, I'm looking at it now. Item 6 allows the township committee to amend the budget after the public hearing. So where I thought you were going is that on tranche 2, if the township committee is displeased with the treatment of the $50,000 or thereabouts that may be left over, that we could amend the budget to contemplate that treatment if we wanted, as I read this ordinance. I'm not in favor of canvassing stakeholders and asking, are you happy with any improvements? I don't even know how that's possibly measured, but I would, and I don't think we have to do it in this resolution. I think just as a matter of practice, we could, based on this ordinance, amend the budget after the public hearing and then deal with it on tranche number 2, if the township committee chooses to take that course.
Mayor? Again, my reading of the ordinance is the budget shall be processed and adopted by the township committee in accordance with the following procedures, which they're following. Some suggestions, and I'm sure our lawyer can appreciate this because he's read this to us he's familiar with this. So any of these suggestions that we deviate are not what we're permitted to do by law. So our ordinance says we shall be introduction and approval, public advertising, public hearing, amendments and hearings if required, adoption. So canvassing, township committee can't just make up our own standards at this point. This is what we're governed by, correct, Kit?
Yeah, let me make this point. The provision you read, I believe, refers to the fact that after the hearing, but before you vote on the adoption of the budget, you could amend it. Irrespective of that, I think as a matter of general law, you have the right under the statute at any point out in the future to do a reevaluation without amending this at all. If the township committee were to decide, gee, we've received a lot of good or bad information about how the DMDA is operating, then you could at that time reevaluate the situation and decide even that you would want to cease the assessment. But that's really not in the process that's here this evening. This is really to approve or not the budget that has been presented, or amended if you feel that you need to amend it prior to adopting it.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Just one note, Mr. Heller raised about the advertising. I see it a requirement for the advertising in the newspaper, which I understand was accomplished. But as I read 5.I.A, it's the public hearing, the notice of the public hearing, not the budget or the audited budget, is the thing that is posted in a public place where public notices are customarily posted in town hall. So I don't know that the township committee is in violation of that, to the extent that it wasn't posted in both those places. Anyhow, it's been informed to us by the clerk, right? Okay.
And
I have
in addition,
I have no further comments on this
To
ordinance.
that point, the clerk in the preparation of Resolution 18-240 takes a position in the first whereas clause that those publication and posting requirements have been met.
And with that, I would like to know if anybody would make a motion to approve Resolution 18-241 to adopt the 2019 DMDA budget.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl Eglo?
Abstain.
Mayor Barsney?
Yes. The next item on the agenda is the special resolution, 2019 SID hearing to adopt the 2019 Special Improvement District role. I will declare that hearing open.
The hearing is on the
Oh,
budget.
sorry.
This is the resolution now that the budget has been approved to set the roll. And all of the properties are listed and the amounts that will be assessed to each.
Any questions or comments on this resolution?
Yeah, I do have a question to our.
Mr. Levy?
Thank you for recognizing me. To our town council. The ordinance itself has the role in it, and that ordinance is well dated, or the role is well dated in that ordinance. I understand that we approve this role. Does it make sense to amend the ordinance to remove the role and make it contemplate each year a resolution about what the role is? Or is this role static? I mean, do we expect that this role would be static? I mean,
No.
we have an ordinance that has an old role in it that's nowhere near what this is.
So I think this was expanded.
Well, what he's saying is the ordinance now doesn't comport with the resolution. So do we need to now?
Do we need to
think
amend the
about
ordinance?
Amend the ordinance to,
We've talked about after this is complete, the assessor and the administrator and I have met to talk about what measures need to be taken going forward. But this role now includes accurately the recently added properties.
Yeah,
that
it's
we
a-
voted on previously.
It's a larger role than it's in the ordinance, I
Right.
get that. So the question is, do we have to amend the ordinance? That's my,
It would
we
be-
don't have to
would be-
answer it today.
It would be a good practice to do that.
well,
That's correct.
we should put that on the to-do list for next year. to
Clean up
allow
the
these- yeah, to
ordinance
clean up
with
the
the role.
ordinance.
Right. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 18-242?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second,
Mr. Levy?
yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsney?
Yes. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. It is the bills list, authorized refund of tax overpayments, authorized contract for barrier-free access to Millburn Public Library. Those are automated doors for the front of the building. Authorized extension of grant agreement with Essex County for use of community development block grant funds. That's for the doors to the public library. Authorize acceptance and signature of Essex County Community Development Block Grant Subrecipient Agreement. Authorize the execution of storm sewer indemnification agreements. Approval of raffle license, approve secondhand jewelry license, and authorize issuance of a request for proposals for environmental analysis studies of the JFK composting site. Are there any comments or questions from the committee with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda?
I just have one
Yes, Ms. Lieberberg.
So on resolution 18-245, because we received this block grant, the actual cost to the township is $14,395.
Correct.
Correct.
Any other questions? Any questions or comments from the public on the consent agenda items? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the resolutions listed on the consent agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Have a vote.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Egler?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. The next resolution, which was removed from the consent agenda, is to authorize the issuance of an RFP to secure services of online news service providers to be designated for the publication of township materials. So there came a question as to why we're doing this, right? So, did you want to speak to this, Ms. Egel?
Well, we did speak about that, and I spoke to Kit about that, and I spoke to our clerk. Right now, by statute, we have to have a physical paper of record, and that's the Star Ledger, the Millburn item. There is no need by law to designate an online media news service. And as it is, the clerk sends out all of these notices to anybody who has asked for that. So TAP or Patch would be on that listserv. So we are in the process of redoing our website. It's going to be a lot more informative, it's going to be a lot more complete, a lot more detailed than it's ever been in the past. So I asked our attorney and our business administrator, what was the need? Why are we doing this when this TAP or Patch or any other news service is already able to post our notices for meetings or legal notices? And that was my question.
So if we do this, can we, if we authorize, if we have a designated news service, online news service provider through this RFP, can we then compel them to put our information on there?
Well, presumably, they're anxious to do this. I don't know that it's a matter of compulsion. The way this arose, a few years ago, I think Mayor Burke advanced the idea that the sense seemed to be that few people really were looking in the newspaper to find these notices or to see what the meeting schedules were, and that perhaps it would be a good idea to augment this whole publicizing process by getting an online news service to put it on the web, which is where people seem more to gain information about things that were going on in the town. He wanted to name TAP as the online news service to do that. I said, well, you can't do that. First of all, the only official media for a municipality to get information out are the newspapers. The law hasn't really caught up with the idea of using web services. Hopefully it will someday, but that's currently not the situation. The newspapers have managed to kind of corral that business opportunity, and they're really the only valid place where an official notice or resolution ordinance can be posted. I said, furthermore, there's a rule against designating one person to do something. It goes back to an old case, believe it or not, the Pied Piper ice cream case, which is a case where the Essex County Park Commission got called to task because they designated the Pied Piper Ice Cream Company as the only ice cream company that could go throughout the park and sell ice cream to people on hot days. And the court said, no, you can't just designate somebody. That's conferring a benefit on a private enterprise through your official action. They said, if you're going to do this, you have to do it on a level playing field, put out an RFP. Any online news service that can meet your requirements would then be entitled to receive these notices and put it on the web. Now, if the day has come where the township's web is going to be so upgraded that is no longer necessary, I leave to you. I don't have the faintest idea whether that's the case. But that's the background, that's why it came about. That's how we have the process we have today. So the issue is joined. Do you need to continue doing that or not? But that's why the current process is underway. The clerk is prepared to go out with an RFP to once again solicit interest, and if anybody meets the qualifications, then they can be given the information to put on their website.
Mr. Levy?
I may be confused on this. So presently, we're obligated to post in 2 newspapers, which we do, and we also choose to do it online, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
voluntarily.
Voluntarily, which we're allowed to do. And the suggestion by Committee Person Eglo is to reduce the means by which notice
No.
is
No, that's not what I'm saying.
publicized.
No, I'm saying we don't need a resolution adjoining a particular online news service. I'm not saying to reduce information, Committeeman Levy, at all. Please, do not construe that's what I said. I'm saying, do we need a resolution to assign this to somebody? And I believe, in speaking to the clerk and to Alex, this information is going to these 2 medias if they want to and if they choose to share it on their system.
Correct. Well, that's the point I wanted to make, that if we don't designate the online in whatever online service it is, then the clerk will dispatch notice to those online services, TAP or whoever, and TAP then elects, if it wants, to post it. It may elect not to. If they're required to do it because they're under the contract, then they have to post it. So the suggestion may have the cause and effect of reducing public notice, reducing transparency,
So
which is
that
my
was-
objection.
That was my question when I said, if we do the RFP and we designate whoever it may be, then they're compelled to put our notices in, right?
You don't have a contract with them. All they have done is expressed an interest in receiving these materials, which is what they want to show, whatever they want to demonstrate, their public spiritedness, or that they want everyone to know as much as possible what's going on in the township. But you don't have them on a contract, you don't have them for hire. They're receiving these because they've sought to do so by submitting a response to your RFP.
Well, it also could be that, the clerk serves at the pleasure of the town administrator or at the mayor, and the mayor could direct the clerk not to post notice at some point absent the requirement in a resolution. I don't understand. It seems to me that there's too much openness to cause notice in these online places not to occur, and I don't know why we would even take that risk.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Lieberberg?
How do we monitor this online? I mean, in the newspaper, you have how do we monitor this exchange from a technical standpoint?
I'm not even sure, what are we monitoring?
Whether or not notices are in or out, or what kind of checks and balances do we as a township have for this information?
How do you monitor?
Well, newspaper, you see, it's print, on November 20th, I can open the newspaper and I see it. Online, is there somebody, I'm asking because I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if anybody monitors what we do with print newspaper.
I'm sure it's monitored because it has to have a written notice when you go out to bid or any of the other, there's a paper trail. Electronically, how do we know? So that would be my.
So just to, and as Kit had mentioned, as Mr. Falcon had mentioned, that the law has not caught up with the fact that online media sources are generally, people's media sources, but, and so therefore, when we advertise in the town's officially designated newspaper, the item, at times where the evidence of that notice must be presented, it's cut out of the newspaper and kept with the stuff. So in terms of the online media notice, it obviously does not get cut out or print out from that.
because it's not an official document.
Correct.
Right, so if it's not an official document, how can we have a resolution saying this is the official paper of record?
No, I want to, let's make that clear too. The online news service is not the official anything, is not the designated anything. It's simply an enterprise that has come forward, and various people who can meet the requirements come forward and expressed an interest in receiving this information so they can put it on their web, but they are not. As a matter of fact, the new RFP, if you decide to go forward with this, will make that point by submitting a response to this RFP. Please be aware of the fact that you're not the official anything, and that you really aren't entitled to say official online news service of Millburn Township. But as to the other question, at least I don't certainly keep an eye on what goes out to the news service and whether they put it on or not. But as to the newspapers, many of those documents require, they're paid for. You
Right.
pay for putting them on.
Right.
They send you a proof of publication
Yes.
so that you know in the form of an affidavit from the paper, we published this on such and such a date.
Right.
That's the check.
So are we charging TAP to put our notices on their forum?
There's no money.
There's no money. So why would you ask Committeeman Levy if that serving at the pleasure of the mayor, a mayor or a business administrator would ask this particular company to not post if we don't have a resolution? Is that what you said?
I'm not sure I follow the question, but to clarify my comment, there's a risk that the clerk, who I understand is the one charged with making these notices, may be directed by a mayor, or if the clerk doesn't take instructions from the mayor, it may be that the mayor directs the township administrator, who then directs the clerk. Either way, why take the risk of under-reporting? I always thought that we were in the business of over-noticing if given the opportunity.
Well, that's quite a leap, but
I guess the real question is, is it a no harm, no foul? I mean, the real question is, what does it I mean, who electronically posts our notices right now anyway?
The TAP.
Ms. Patch?
Patch does not, to my knowledge.
Okay, so it's up. So I guess the question is, I don't know whether they would if they don't fill out this RFP, but why would we limit, I don't know how that works.
well, when I spoke to you earlier, I think we discussed, do we even need a resolution? Because he, or if Patch chooses, would be getting the notice from our clerk at any rate. And is this something we want to start adding to our website? Because we're in the process of redeveloping
Well,
our
even
website.
if we add it to our website,
Right.
you would still want it to be in whatever, you want it out there in as many forms and.
So you're saying you feel we
and
need a
sites.
resolution to do this?
I don't know whether we need a resolution. That's,
Well, I think just to the point is that what happens is the newspapers that are designated and must be designated.
Correct.
And then everything else is would be advice only, which means they can choose to publish it or not.
Even if there's a resolution, they're not compelled to publish if there's a resolution.
No, the resolution is kind of saying you've agreed to do this, but to Mr. Falcon's point, it's not a contract, but it's something to say that you've agreed to do this. But again, if you choose not to do a resolution, then it would be an advice copy only. So in other words, do with what you want.
Would we then ask any online service to then show us and forward us an email that they have in fact done this?
well, you can, but it's not a formal document, so. It doesn't matter, my only concern is if you do an RFP, they've indicated they wanna put their stuff, put the town's information on their website. Will they do it if they don't come back with an RFP? They may. And I don't know that I truly don't know if it matters one way or the other. Do they do it anyway?
I don't
You
know.
don't know.
No, I mean,
Yeah. So, I don't think it hurts, I don't think it hurts us at all. I think it's a no harm, no foul type of thing.
There's nothing pending right now, right?
There's nothing.
No resolution
Well,
pending.
we didn't, yeah.
Didn't we table the resolution for tonight? Was my understanding that we're,
Well, the reason, if we're going to do it, you want to do it for January, so that you would have to do the resolution now so the RFP could go out. If you don't want to do it, I mean, we can,
We could always re-resolve it later on, and so it's done
right,
25 weeks rather than 26 weeks. I mean,
right,
it's
I
not a,
mean, exactly, so we can table it if you want to think about it,
I just don't understand why we
wouldn't do it.
wouldn't do it. Frankly, we could have passed this resolution in a tenth of the amount of time this entire dialogue has taken place.
Well, listen, do you want to pass the resolution?
I'll be happy to pass the
All right,
resolution
so
now.
why don't we make the motion and
So moved.
move?
You could say it better, Sam.
Well, it's actually, may I have a motion to approve resolution 18-248,
So moved.
and may I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Leedy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
abstain.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Egler?
Abstain.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Okay, and now we have a motion to support the upgrading and improvement of regional infrastructure. I'm going to ask a member of the public, Mr. Dan Bear, if you're still here, who was instrumental in advocating for this, to come forward and make some comments.
Thank you, Mayor and Committee. A few weeks ago, I approached the committee with the recommendation for you to take the lead on the preparation of a resolution in support of funding for major strategic investments in the state mostly outside the borders of the township, which would have a direct effect on the value of our properties. Many of us every day drive the roads and take the trains into New York City and elsewhere. And we have seen over the years the reliability of such service and infrastructure go down precipitously. So I want to thank you for taking the time to consider this resolution, which really results in strategic investments that directly preserve the value of our town. And Kit, thank you very much for the preparation of the resolution. I thought you did an extremely thorough job. And we'll be entering a time of the year, particularly the winter months, where services become more and more unreliable. And I'd love to hear about your stories from last Thursday and how long it took you guys to get home, because it took me 4.5 hours from Newark just to drive to Millburn.
Me too.
You too,
could have
yeah.
carpooled.
You were probably right behind me, Joni. So we're going to see more and more and more of this. It's also my understanding that in the near term, New Jersey Transit is looking at other options to increase capacity to other places other than New York City, to Hoboken, which means that that type of project could include a third track between Summit and Short Hills. So the investments that are required to continue to preserve and enhance our township are basically are being threatened and being held up. And this is an occurrence, as I mentioned before, that's happening across the country. So once again, I thank you for taking the steps of preparing the resolution. What I've also brought tonight, and if you're interested in seeing it, I'll leave it over with Jimmy, is a document that was prepared by the Regional Plan Association, which did an evaluation of the increase in property values near improvements to transportation infrastructure. So I'll leave this for you tonight. if anybody would like to take a look at it. But the results of that study showed that there was upwards to $20,000 to $30,000 in increase per property, depending how close you were to a transportation improvement. And this was done specifically on projects that were implemented in New Jersey. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions on the resolution that I could answer.
Just
Sam?
one. And I support the resolution, but it's not only to increase property values. Some might say that's a selfish reason to do a resolution, but it's also because the infrastructure is important to maintain the vibrancy of the community, to be able to commute to the mass transit areas that many residents here commute to and things like that. So it's also to improve the infrastructure around here, which would have the beneficial result perhaps of increasing property values, I assume, according to that report. So I think it's a dual purpose, really.
Absolutely, I agree. There are a number of benefits that would result with the improvements in investment in infrastructure. We're all I mentioned that because we're all very concerned about our properties, and they're a very important investment and one of the most important things that we have. But yes, there are other primary, secondary, tertiary benefits of transportation improvements. So certainly I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
In 6 months, what address should we use to send it to Mr. Trump?
I'm not going there.
Sorry.
No answer on that. But again, thank you very much. I'd just like to also take a second. As I mentioned before, in my previous discussion a couple of weeks ago, I've had the opportunity to sit where you do. And I give you all, certainly, I appreciate very much what you do twice a month and all the meetings. But what I'd like to say tonight is that I'd like to specifically thank Jody for your dedication and commitment to the town. And certainly we appreciate everything you did, and thank you very much for serving the township. So thank you. And thank you, and I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too as well. I have a motion to approve Resolution 18250.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl Egler?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsney?
Yes, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 18254 to authorize person-to-person and place-to-place transfer of plenary retail consumption liquor license. It's the Talman to Newmark NJ LLC, which is the new eatery going in at the mall. May I have any questions or comments with respect to that? May I have a resolution to approve may I have a motion to approve Resolution 18254?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Dahl Egler?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsney?
Yes.
I just have a question. Can I just ask you a question? When do we know the anticipated start date of this opening of this restaurant? Nope. Okay.
We'll just presume it's soon. We'll hope it's soon. Ms. Rosenberg, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2513-18.
I present for consideration an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2513-18, Ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 7 Traffic of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Millburn. This ordinance is proposed to address the time limit parking on Essex Street. This is to unify all of Essex Street to have the same time limit at all sections of the road. It will reduce confusion as to different time limits along the roadway and will give patrons more time to park within the downtown. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law.
I declare the hearing open. Does anyone from the committee have any questions or comments with respect to ordinance 2513-18?
Anyone from the public have any questions or comments with respect to ordinance number 2513-18? No? Okay.
I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with the law.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ball Ego?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. I present for consideration an ordinance entitled, ordinance number 2514-18, an ordinance to amend Chapter 13 Fire Prevention Code and Chapter 8 Parks and Recreation of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn. The purpose of this ordinance is to update the township's ordinances to address new state regulations regarding the minimum fee that can be charged for fire permits, types 1 through 4, and to prohibit the use of now legal sparklers, non-exploding and non-aerial fireworks in the township's parks. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage is advertised in accordance with law. I declare the hearing open. Anyone from the committee have questions or comments regarding ordinance number 2514-18? Anyone from the public have any questions or comments regarding ordinance number 2514-18? I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading, and that the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ball Ego?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. The next items on the agenda, ordinance 2515-18 and ordinance 2516-18 are deferred. They were adopted on first reading by the Township Committee on October 16th. Both ordinances are in reference to acquisition of drainage easements, interest, as well as temporary construction easements in portions of properties located in the township on Horan Circle, on which to locate pipes and related flood control equipment underground. The installation of the pipes and equipment will allow the existing Gilbert Place stormwater pumping station to handle a higher volume of stormwater. Due to a publication error, the second reading and public hearings on these ordinances will not be considered this evening. The publication error has been resolved, and the notice will be placed in the November 22nd item stating that the ordinances will be taken up on second reading and for the hearings to take place at the next regular Township Committee meeting scheduled for December 4th. May I have a motion to carry the public hearings of ordinances 2515-18 and 2516-18 to the December 4th Township Committee meeting, which begins at 7:30 p.m.?
So moved. I think procedurally it's to table them, though, not to defer them, right? Mr. Falcon?
No,
No, they
They're
haven't.
not being
they-
tabled.
No, they're not being tabled.
they're just being carried forward so that the publication could be corrected.
Okay, you just don't have to act on them, though. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. I move to carry 2515-18 and 2516-18.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Ball Ego?
Yes.
And Mayor Barsting?
Yes. Ms. Thal Eglo, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2517-18.
I would like to present an ordinance entitled Township of Millburn Ordinance Number 2517-18, an ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending Article 6 of the Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance of the Township of Millburn. The purpose of this ordinance is to allow for temporary fencing around the perimeter of properties where construction activity is occurring, in compliance with the requirements of the proposed revisions of Section 3-8 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn, and as an exception to Section 609.6 of the Development Regulations and Zoning Ordinance of the Township of Millburn. Temporary fencing during construction activity would be required in order to block the site of ground-level construction activity from neighboring properties, and to mitigate the effects of dust and debris from leaving the property. The ordinance provides for an exception for temporary fencing to Section 609.6. And I believe this is because we've been getting a lot of pushback from some residents, seeing some construction and debris in their neighborhoods. And this is to alleviate that. And we all just got another email, I believe yesterday or today, showing of some unsightly grounds, which hopefully temporary fencing could alleviate some of that. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018.
I'll second it.
Thank you. May I have a vote, please?
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Bursky?
Yes. I would like to present an ordinance entitled Ordinance Number 2518-18, an ordinance of the Township of Millburn, County of Essex, State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 3 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn. The purpose of this ordinance is to provide appropriate standards and regulations for conducting construction activity within the suburban residential environment of Millburn Township. The ordinance establishes standards and limitations so as to promote sanitary and safe construction sites, avoid adverse impacts on neighboring properties and residents, including from noise and dust, and to provide for the health and safety of the residents. This ordinance arose out of complaints by neighbors with construction activity on neighboring properties, and includes certain restrictions such as heavy equipment on holidays and wetting down of demolition of structures during demolition and other safety and health matters for our township. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, December 18th, 2018. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Bursky?
Yes. Mr. Levy, you are scheduled to sponsor ordinance 2519-18.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance 2519-118 amends recreation fees in Chapter 8 Parks and Recreational Areas of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Millburn. These fees, just some background, the rec fees haven't been raised in 2 years. These are nominal fees. Some are 1%, some 2%. The largest fee increase is 12%. For those who attend rec committee meetings, you will have learned that the rec fees, all the services provided, do not support the cost to provide the services. It runs at about 68%. The increase in these fees will not allow rec to be self-sustaining in that way. Township committee still supports all these activities. These are nominal increases. Again, the fees have been static for the last 2 years. There's nominal increases to include costs of inflation and the extra costs in providing all of the services. I move that this ordinance be taken up and passed on first reading, and that the township clerk be authorized to have the ordinance published in accordance with law in the item, and for hearing and final passage on Tuesday, December 18, 2018.
May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberberg?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Paul Eglo?
Yes.
And Mayor Bursky?
Yes. Does any committee member have an item of new business to discuss?
Old or new?
New.
New.
No? Okay, I
Yeah,
have.
just one.
Oh, go ahead.
Just one thing on, Committeewoman Lieberberg spoke about when she was at the League of Municipalities, the cannabis. The first time that the Senate will vote on this is actually the Monday after Thanksgiving. It's not in January. It was announced today by the legislature that it's going to be voted on Monday, and the issue is the municipality taxes. Right now, given Sweeney's comments, New Jersey will be the highest tax cannabis state in the country if recreational passes. So that's the latest as of this afternoon.
And was the number indicated in terms of a percentage?
It was, but I don't recall what it was.
Well, my information was based upon what the league was anticipating last week. I don't
Right.
know if they,
Murphy saw the unfunded pensions and decided he had to move faster to get all these taxes in.
that could
so.
very well be.
Okay, I'd like to discuss the status of 2 bond authorizations that the township has in connection with its streets project. It's been raised by members of the public before, so I think it would be prudent to consider canceling the authorizations that we have. One authorization has been issued, and unless canceled, the township will continue to pay interest on the unused amount. This would cancel an outstanding balance of $2,368,107. The bond amount that has been authorized and not issued is $3,500,000. At the December 4th meeting, I intend to introduce a resolution canceling those authorizations in the combined amount of $5,868,107. So that's just sort of put in your pipe and smoke it, and we'll deal with that in early December. Now, old business.
I just wanted to ask if there's any update on the energy aggregation. I received something in my electric bill today that you could switch to green energy, which is not part of the town.
Correct.
So it might have been confusing to some residents, knowing that we are talking about doing this. So, just
No,
update.
they're still working on their RFP, still putting that language together. Should have a more comprehensive update for the committee at the 4th meeting, at the December 4th meeting. But things are still moving, it's just that they're working on the language in the RFP right now.
So if somebody were to answer the mailing that we got, for instance, and then the town came out with another aggregation, they would be free to cancel that one and join the town's.
That would be my assumption.
Yeah.
Correct. But that is not from the town.
That is not
That
from the town, yeah.
The aggregation group that consists of, Montclair, Verona, Maplewood, and Millburn.
And it really was just saying you can switch to clean energy. It didn't have anything about pricing if you're gonna save money by doing that.
Right.
I know we spoke about the live streaming, will be ready to go, the camera for
Yeah.
Board of Adjustment and Planning Board.
So just by way of update, the new system has been installed. You see our fancy camera up there. We're going to take a month to train an individual to work with the system and have everything sort of going on all cylinders January 1st.
And I think we'll be saving some money doing our own filming.
Correct.
Right, that's a good thing.
Anything else?
Those were the 2 things.
Oh, any old business? Nope. No, any old business down here?
Just, we're just gonna put our electronic sign hats back on for the next one.
Correct.
Yes.
The committee will have a resolution for the December 4th meeting as well. A lot of stuff happening at the end of the year, but just to authorize us to go out to bid for that electronic signboard.
Great. Okay, and I anticipate getting a report from our traffic consultant with respect to the left turn from Main Street to Essex Street out for public, out to the public, no later than our December 4th meeting. So that's the old business. Okay, so now we are at public discussion. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, speak into the podium microphone so your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. If you read from a prepared statement, please give a copy to Megan or email a copy to the Township Clerk's office at cgotti@millburntwp.org. We request that you limit your comments to 3 minutes and try not to repeat what others have said. We will not use our clock unless we find that privilege is being abused. So, with that being said, the microphone is open. Jennifer.
Hello, Jennifer Duckworth, 82 Linden Street, Millburn. I'm addressing you as requested by the PTOC Safety Committee. The parent.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have one for myself.
Here, take mine, I'll share. Oh.
Thank you. So the reason I'm addressing you today is because of the crossing guard schedule. We've been in conversation since April 30th about crossing guards and that they don't match up to the times of the schools. And so we are wondering what can be done to align the crossing guard schedule with the middle school release. Middle school, it lets out at 2:32 and the crossing guards leave by 2:45. And so we've tried multiple occasions to get this lined up. And we understand that currently the crossing guards are that there's a lack of them, and there's a announcement to hire crossing guards, and so we understand that, but at the same time we would like to realign the schedule at least, so when those positions are filled that they suit the needs of the schedule of the kids. And so the middle column is the scheduled time off of the township website. I know the off of the school's website, and then the rightmost column is what we received from the police department on April 30th. And so we're just asking that these be aligned. I know so. Thank you very much for your consideration. And do you have any questions? Or?
No, I think it's pretty clear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Hi, Catherine Dorm, 29 Byron Road. I'm also in favor of that request that Jennifer just put forth. I've just began serving on the PTO Safety Committee. And I think there's a kind of strong desire right now to ask that we coordinate as much as we can as a community in order to improve safety conditions for the children. There's been movement as far as busing zones have gone, and we have inclement weather issues obviously to contend with, and at the same time whatever we can do in order to improve safety generally would be greatly welcome. With that in mind, I had the opportunity to email the committee on a few occasions regarding the desire for increased safety measures in the community generally over the last few years. And some of these are quite related to schools, and others are just kind of community issues. I am one of the people who is grateful for the changes that were made in downtown as far as some of the blocking of making left turns, because I have a middle schooler who walks into town on Fridays, and I'm grateful that I feel more comfortable with safety. At the same time, I think that there are other very important issues of safety to be addressed throughout the wider community. And among these, I would say, as a Hartshorn representative, I've been working to ask for better safety measures at the Hartshorn School on White Oak Ridge. I had shared with the committee this morning that my dream would be to have a permanent solar-powered speed radar sign there, like the one that is by Christ Church. And also for as far as schools go, the more bolded, painted crosswalks. I noticed recently that when the crosswalks, we have a lot of slopes in our town. We're short hills after all. So when the crosswalks are painted and there's slopage in the road, it's visually more difficult, that much more difficult to see the crosswalks. On the way down here, I happened to notice at the corner of Short Hills Avenue and Millburn Avenue that the crosswalks are sadly completely worn away. So I think that that's very important. I know there are some areas that are county roads. That, you know, our most notorious danger spot is the corner of Hobart and White Oak Ridge. But in the 7 years that I've lived here, I've communicated to different versions of this board and to no avail. At some point, I think that this is important to address, and I know it involves county, and there are probably a million complexities that I don't understand, but at the same time, it's ridiculous. And I've witnessed so many accidents there. And I will just wrap up with just asking another danger spot, Hobart and Highland. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to cross over there. It's always like an accident waiting to happen, and I haven't pulled the data on that. I know Hobart and White Oak Ridge is like without dispute the worst. And finally, another thing that I've been asking for, and I gather this is also a county road, but the Upper Millburn Avenue is now becoming vibrant in its own right over the last several years, and I know that, you know, big efforts were made to relocate pedestrian walkways where people actually cross, I believe the one near Dunkin' Donuts, it's important to have it where people cross. So I would ask that you please create a pedestrian crosswalk where people cross at Squirrel and the Bee. You take your life in your hands. It shouldn't be that way. It's a vibrant part of town. All the business going to Poe and Squirrel and the Bee. There's no reason why you should feel like you take your life in your hands just crossing the street. And parking is already an issue, and that's one thing maybe harder to solve, but having a crosswalk seems fairly straightforward. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, Carrie Strasberg, Undercliff. Our entire committee showed up here because we just want to reach a larger audience with some of the things that we've been working on for a while. So speaking of taking your life in your hands, last Thursday was not good.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no clue.
It's been under wraps, but what a lot of people were hoping for from the Board of Ed meeting last night was much greater cooperation between this committee and our town government and our Board of Ed in the methodology that is used to make the decisions. I know Sam has, a lot of knowledge about this. The community is truly looking to you for help. Many of the people that are reached out to for this are, our police, our fire, our DPW. It feels like there have been 2 times now where bad decisions were made. And it's honestly only by the grace of God that a whole bunch of kids and a whole bunch of parents and a whole bunch of teachers and a whole bunch of residents weren't more disastrously impacted. So a lot of suggestions were made last night, but to be honest, most of it involves you guys and not the public suggesting things. We are hopeful that everyone can, kind of put on their thinking caps and do whatever they can to make sure that Thursday doesn't happen again. I know it was a tri-state area mess, but our town has a lot of very particular elements to it. As I said last night, we're not short flats, we're short hills. And it doesn't take much to not be able to go up Wyoming Avenue and Highland and a lot of other places. So we're just really hoping that you guys can all get involved with this at every level. And another thing that we were, that just happened to me this morning, because sometimes I just bring you what happened to me during the day, is driving up Millburn Avenue to the high school. And speaking of where people cross, lots of kids cross where the Ed Center is. And we've been asking for a crosswalk there before my kids were even in high school, and one has already graduated. It's like watching kids play Frogger, trying to cross the street there. So the PTSD Safety Committee would love it if everyone could decide that they're on the safety committee too, because we're all in this together. So, thank you.
Just one, I just have one comment.
Yes.
On the, 'cause I used to serve on the board
Yes.
of Ed.
You were the president, in fact, at one point.
I used to be involved in the decision-making on when to let schools out when these storms came because the superintendent would consult with Board of Ed.
That doesn't happen anymore.
I didn't know that,
Yeah.
but the decision is, while in a vacuum, easy to make in terms of when do we let out and do we let out. Busing drives all of those decisions. And so even if the superintendent knew the severity of the storm, which no forecaster did, but even if you ascribe that knowledge to the superintendent, she either would have had to cancel classes that day to accommodate the buses, which everyone would have objected to, given that it was sunny in the morning and those kinds of things, or you would have had to do it really somewhere around 10 o'clock, because we don't own our own buses, with the exception, at least when I was on the board, of 11. The school board owned 11 buses. I don't know if it's increased or decreased then. And so we contract it out, and then you contact the bus company and say, this is what we intend to do. The bus company has to marshal its drivers, and there's a fail rate, at least then, of at least 12% on all bus drivers who say that they're going to show up, don't. And you have to accommodate for that too. It's not unlike the airlines who overpopulate schedules to accommodate people who cancel at the last minute. And so it's a very difficult process, and I don't know what happened at the board meeting yesterday. I wasn't there. I imagine there were a lot of angry parents because I had heard that there were some students that were stranded on buses that were stuck.
Until 9 o'clock at night,
I-
including special needs kids.
I
Who are
understand that,
preschoolers.
and that had happened too when I was on the board, and you may have been one of those who.
No, my kids walked.
But it's more, and I agree that coordination is important. But even if we had that knowledge, I'm not sure it would be that different, the result, given that busing is the major impact of all this. And so you contact the bus company and saying, listen, we're going to advance our release from X time to this time. And sometimes the bus company says we can't accommodate it.
Right, but
And that's just the way it is.
not in the last 5 years, but in the decade before that, we had several occasions where early closings were called during the school day. And it was with a lot less kind of instant communication that we have now. We had, chains of parents calling, class parents calling, making sure that all the parents knew.
Right.
It feels like one of the things that Dr. Burton is reaching out for is, are our streets okay for the buses to drive on? And clearly on Thursday they weren't. Not maybe for the first round from the high school and middle school that went out half an hour late, getting back to the elementary schools. But you had the elementary school runs leaving at 5, 6 o'clock at night on roads that should not have been driven on at that point.
Maybe, but the other thing is to shutter the kids in place then, so.
Which was an option for them and is what other towns did and
But then you have
what
1,000
Dr.
cars
Burton
coming
said
into the
she
school,
would
though.
do now if she could go back and change that decision. That she would have had them all shelter in place.
Yeah, I'm not challenging Dr. Burton's decision-making, nor am I familiar with it, but my point is it is more than just making a decision when to leave out. There are many factors involved, many of which are outside of the school board's control, and I would submit the township committee's control as well too.
Okay.
Because there are some county roads involved in this.
Absolutely. It felt to many people that they were not aware of what the conditions were as they were happening. So we're just hoping for some more coordination and some more information so that they can perhaps make better decisions.
Carol Malik Hirsch, 93 Cedar Street. I'm not on the safety committee, but I did intend tonight to come here and have something to say about safety, and that is this crosswalk right outside in front of Dunkin' Donuts. Just about every time I'm in town, I see something that's really uncomfortable. It's great that there's a crosswalk. I understand that that's where the crosswalk needs to be because people are crossing and so on, but I wanted to know, are there any plans to put the pedestrian-generated flashing lights like they put up by the post office? I've encountered that crosswalk as both a pedestrian and as a motorist. And frankly, as a motorist, as you're coming up it, you're looking at the light ahead. You're also blocked by parked cars on both sides, so you don't see the pedestrians that are trying to get across that. And as much as I love the mural, it's also more busyness there. Not to mention the competition of people trying to get out of the parking lot while people are trying to go ahead. So just tonight, another situation, there is a law, I've studied it, I know there's a 2010 law of what motorists and pedestrians are supposed to do at crosswalks. Frankly, I don't think anybody knows it. Maybe people have gotten their license since 2010, but people drive and are actually on the crosswalk while they're driving up. It's nobody's fault. It's just a situation there, and I really think the flashing pedestrian-generated lights would be just one more thing to say, hey, there are people trying to get across the street. So if they would consider that, I appreciate it. And also, I just wanted to say, second the motion about Highland and Hobart. It's horrible. It needs a four-way stop.
We're working on it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Ed Mazer, Greenwood Drive. I have several questions on matters which I've brought up before. First one is whether the Township Committee intends to do anything about regulating the operating hours of businesses in town. This has come up with the proposal for a 24-hour operation at the former Exxon site at Millburn and Vauxhall Road. At the time this was originally brought up, Mr. Falcon, you correctly pointed out that under the time of application law, that nothing could be done affecting that business, that application before the zoning board. Since then, that application has been withdrawn. At this time, there would be nothing precluding the Township Committee from instituting an ordinance regulating that site, and more generally, I think we should be looking at regulating businesses throughout the township, particularly where they're adjacent to residential units. Is anything being done on that?
There is no draft ordinance now.
Does the Township Committee intend to do anything?
I think it's certainly something to be discussed come early next year.
Okay. Somebody recently just mentioned about the safety at the intersection of Hobart Avenue and White Oak Ridge Road. Alex, you had commissioned a traffic safety study of that intersection. The traffic consultant concluded that they'd clearly qualify for a traffic light which would improve safety. We have about one serious accident a month. At that, there's been at least 23 since April of 2016. It would improve safety, and also it would significantly improve the traffic flow there. That's I guess, a county intersection. Has the county been contacted on that?
They have.
And
We
what
give
is
a
it?
copy of the study.
And what has the response been?
We have not received a direct response to our letter and copy of that study to date. But I've been in contact with George Serio, our county representative, as well about the matter, so that this can be floated to multiple departments within the county.
Do we have any indication what the time frame will be for possibly getting some action there?
There has been no indication. But I would anticipate that if the county is serious about doing it or doing something there, that now is the time. The budget, the timing is right. They're going to be working on their budget as well, you know, and so it's good timing to get a hold of them.
If the county declines to do anything, is this anything that the township committee would opt to do on its own? It'd be about a $400,000 price tag, according to your traffic consultant.
That would be a discussion for the township committee to have on that matter.
Okay. We had previously, I guess it was supposed to be a test ordinance on, or for a limited time, the right turn from Main Street onto Ridgewood Road. And right now it's, I guess, 7 to 9, 2 to 4 every day of the week. I think I had suggested doing it to school days. I think some of the powers to be in South Mountain Civic Association felt that it would be less confusing just to have it Monday to Friday. I think we'd all agree that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense prohibiting traffic 7 to 9 Saturday morning and Sunday morning. Is the Township Committee planning to revisit this and possibly reduce the hours when the right turn is restricted?
No,
It's going to stay that way?
it is. And I believe that the trial period is over. I think that we have a final ordinance now, right?
Well, we're working on a revision of Chapter 7 as a whole, which would include this.
Okay, yeah. Well, we discussed it at the South Mountain, Washington Section Ad Hoc Committee. It was brought up to change the time period to just Monday through Friday. And during the discussion, it's perhaps less in the winter, but the park is used a lot as well. And the Washington Section representatives requested that we not change the period, to leave it also on the weekend for the safety of the children crossing between Washington Section and South Mountain Section as well. And it's good for you guys.
The Washington section would be not impacted by this. This is coming up Millburn Avenue and turning into the South Mountain section.
Understood. Understood.
So there's nothing going to be done on that then? It's going to...
That's the plan.
All right. The last one, and I think you probably alluded to this before, the traffic light heading south on Main Street stops 13 seconds. The red light starts 13 seconds before the red light stops in the other direction. In other words, the green light heading north on Main Street is 13 seconds longer than it is heading south. Right now, the traffic heading north can only go straight. At the present time, there, to me, is no logical reason why we're stopping the traffic heading south 13 seconds earlier. During the week, the traffic always backs up to Glen Avenue in the evening and sometimes as far as Parsonage Hill Road. The traffic flow would be greatly improved if that traffic light were retimed so that the cycle was the same heading north and heading south.
Okay.
All right, is that something that you'll discuss with your traffic consultant?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Sherman, South Mountain Civic Association. I just wanted to add something to what Mr. Mazur said. As I recall, and I do not believe she's here at the moment, but the person from the Washington section who's on ad hoc traffic also pointed out that they felt that that restriction at the corner is important for people who live in the Washington section, who walk through the neighborhood, for example, to ShopRite. So I did advocate for an amendment so that it would be 7 to 9, 2 to 4 school days only. But there were other perspectives as well. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
May I ask something of Mrs. Sherman?
We're not gonna have a discussion, we're just gonna have comments from.
I'll ask her after the meeting.
There you go.
Private.
Anyone else?
I have one more. I'm sorry to, Jennifer Duckworth, 82 Linden Street. I've just been watching this, and I know because I follow the transportation discussions that go on in this township committee, and I noticed that there's a lot of discussion about transportation, and I just wanted to, I know it's been a topic of conversation before, to have a separate standalone transportation committee that had its own bylaws and was able to report back and give advice to this committee so that you wouldn't have hours of discussion about transportation, that the safety committee from the schools would have somebody who they could communicate with, and that there would be offline discussions about transportation and safety. Mr. Mazur's conversation, the Essex County Transportation Advisory Board came out with a transportation master plan that does designate some of these intersections. The Essex County would like to have some direct communication, but there's oftentimes there's a lot of different voices speaking. So I respectfully would like to put forward that a separate transportation committee be established and have representation from this committee and from the Board of Ed and the police department and the fire department and everybody who wants to talk about it, and then come back and give recommendations to you so that you're not overwhelmed with all of our problems. Thank you.
Nice idea. Thank you.
Just very briefly, Jamie Schroeder, 77 Jefferson Avenue, Short Hills. Just want to remind everybody, well, hopefully, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. But then after Thanksgiving, we have Shop Small Saturday. Shop Small, it is Saturday. And of course, the second annual Winter Walk in Taylor Park. I know it was touched upon briefly, but as a formal announcement, the foot parade is going to commence at 4 o'clock. There's going to be a lot of festivities, a great event to support local, get out, enjoy a great park, and come out for the huge, bigger and better park lighting at 5 o'clock, and entertainment from some of our high school students, as well as our great talented musicians and vocalists from the Paper Mill and beyond.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Wait, may I also remind the people that on that December Sunday night, there'll be a Hanukkah lighting at Taylor Park. So in addition to the light up.
That's not a
December
township.
2nd.
December 2nd. Well, it's something that's available for the community if they would like to join in at Taylor Park.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second? May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.